And we are live. We're live. Welcome. I didn't know if you would be here. I'm happy you're here. Welcome. I am Brittany, your manifesting mentor. If you're new here, I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I'm a woman who's walking the walk and sharing what works. And I'm so glad to be here this evening. It's Tuesday night. I'm not going to date it because I don't know when you're watching this. But if you're new here, I welcome you. I have been reading Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I've been reading it chapter by chapter for a third time, y'all, because one and two were not enough. And like many people in Dr. Joe's community who's come across his work, we understand that the repetition of it all is what really keeps you in the flow of being grounded within yourself, and just having a daily practice and a routine really keeps you on track. And it's so easy, especially in today's world, to get sidetracked with all the things, especially the social media, the political climate. If you know, you know, we ain't got to get into that here. But we do this work to really improve the quality of our day to day lives and also become supernatural and do the things that we never knew we could do. So tonight we're diving into chapter 9, which is the walking meditation. And this is one of the most practical and transformational tools, and also most coveted tools in Dr. Joe's community, because I've seen so many stories of transformation that reference this particular meditation with shifting so much for them. And I have my own, experience with some of that. So if you've missed any of my previous chapters, I've been creating basically a playlist from introduction. It includes all of my lives here on YouTube. It's linked in my bio along with my vision book journal. It's a tool that I created in 2017 to help you design your future with intention and clarity. As a matter of fact, I have a copy of my book here, and I like see me with showing my stuff. This is pink. It's overexposed in this lighting, but here's the black edition. If you can't get with the pink, oh wait, it's showing. It's pink. At any rate, these are linked in my bio, in my description of all my videos and all my profiles. It's the perfect companion for this work. It's basically giving you an opportunity to map out your dream life in the areas of life that matter most, of what I've researched to have mattered most amongst most of us. So that's the housekeeping stuff. And without further ado, we'll get into part 1 of chapter 9, which is where Dr. Joe introduces the walking meditation, his most coveted tool in the toolbox of all the things that he teaches, or all the meditations. So here, Dr. Joe reminds us that sitting in meditation is not enough. That's only half the work. He teaches that embodiment happens when you start to move as the person that you're becoming. So, in other words, everything that we practice in meditation, learning how to regulate our nervous system, learning how to bless our energy centers and raise the frequency of matter in our bodies, right? Increasing the frequency of our electromagnetic field and our existence, our essence. He says that we need to learn how to move through our day to day life with that energy. So you do your meditation, you feel amazing, you feel like you're on high, you are embodying your future self for a good amount of time until you're back into your day to day routine. You're encountering familiar circumstances, you're encountering familiar people with familiar dynamics, and then you're triggered, and now you're back in your same program. And he says it's basically like canceling out all that good work, right? Because you don't just want to do all the things to get into those states only to have them be as temporary as watching a movie on Netflix, right? We want to embody this work. We want to embody being emotionally regulated, even in the face of something that could be challenging. We want to embody, staying grounded within ourselves, even in the face of a familiar dynamic with somebody in our lives. We want to be able to handle adversity with clarity and intention, not overly emotional, not chaotic, sporadic, because we're never proud of those moments. And we don't want to exist like that. We know what it does to our body scientifically now, thanks to Dr. Joe. And we don't want to live by the stress hormones of what's familiar. We want to live by, in essence, everything that we're learning through this work. So, the walking meditation is where visualization meets the physical body. So, you're taking everything that you put in your mind movie and all the blessings of the energy centers and those good feeling meditations, and you're bringing it with you in your day to day life. And he basically he walks us through the meditation in part two, which I'll go over in a bit. But it's not about just walking mindlessly, right? It's about walking with the intention of what you intended for. If you already created your mind movie, or if you've scripted in your vision book journal, um, whatever those things are, he tells you to pick a scene and start to embody that as you're walking. And he guides you through a meditation as you're doing this. But what you're actually doing is emotionally rehearsing your future self as if it's already done. And that's the whole gag, right? Anything that you've manifested in your life before learning this information, or even before learning a whole lot about manifestation in general, you subconsciously were already being the version of you who was destined to have it. I could attest to this as it relates to, I told my college story on TikTok eons ago, but I manifested going to the college that I wanted to go to. I manifested many experiences long before I understood what law of attraction was or law of assumption was. We all have. We are natural co creators. We just didn't understand how we were existing and how it all worked. And so, when teachings like Neville's law of assumption, law of attraction, and even Dr. Joe Dispenza come along to help us make sense of it all, in hindsight, you can track back to when you were embodying and walking through your life as the version of you who was already the one. You were already the one to get it done, the one to accomplish it, whatever that was for you. And so, this is the phase where you condition your body to a new emotional state so consistently that your body starts believing that it's already living that future. And so many of the testimonials in Dr. Joe's community, many of the people talk about how by the time their miracle comes through, by the time they have that shift in their lives, there's not a whole lot of excitement around it. They are not as wowed by it as they presumed they would be. And many of them say it's because they rehearsed it so much. And Dr. Joe says this too. It's because they rehearsed it so much that it their body feels like it basically already happened. So think about the things that you do every single day, like routine. You're not overly excited about any of that stuff, right? Because it's so familiar. And that's exactly what you want to get to a point of. You want to get to the point where whatever it is you're conditioning yourself for, it becomes so familiar to the body that by the time it happens, you could be happy for it. You could be grateful for it, but you're probably not like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened, because it's natural, it's familiar. Neville talks about this too when he tells us to feel it real, right? And to give it the tones of reality, and to um, practice it so much, return to the state of the wish fulfilled so much that it becomes natural to you. That's where all the resistance has resided, and you can now become the receiver. And so part of my personal reflection with this is I've done walking meditations where I began walking feeling uncertain and super discouraged in the beginning, right? But by the time it ended, I felt powerful. I felt aligned. I felt like the one to get the blessing, right? Because I felt emotionally connected to my future self. And as you get into this practice, you'll notice the same. So the moment you start walking as that version of you who already has it, who's already living it, something shifts. And that something is your electromagnetic frequency. You become less resistant and you become more magnetic to the very things that you are calling in. And so your posture changes, at least mine did. Your energy changes, and reality cannot help but to catch up, but to respond. And that's the whole goal. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions that came in. This first person said, What if I feel silly pretending to be someone that I'm not yet? Ooh, I would say that's conditioning. Anytime you label whatever technique you're using as silly, that's usually your body being so used to your program that it's just judging what it doesn't feel natural with. So your past identity is going to naturally resist something that it's not used to, right? So if you're stepping into a new identity, the more you do it, the more familiar it's going to become. And I want you to shift your mindset about it for a second. Instead of looking at it as pretending or being silly, change your language around it, because your body only knows what you tell it. So if you tell it this is silly, it's gonna it's gonna treat it like it's silly. If you tell it you're pretending, it's gonna treat it like, okay, this isn't real. But if you tell it you're practicing it, or if you tell it we're rehearsing, kind of like what an actor does when they're preparing for the role of a lifetime. I talked about this on TikTok. It's one of my viral videos where I talk about main character energy. Treat your desired future, your mind movie, whatever it is you're calling in, as if you are an Oscar winning actress or actor and you are rehearsing for the role of a lifetime. So every time you pull up that script, you are asking yourself, who is this character? What's the context? How do they walk? How do they talk? What's their energy like? What's their personality like? And you're embodying it as best you know, your own best interpretation of that. And so if you tell your body we're rehearsing rather than we're pretending, big difference. Small word change, right? But big difference, because these words have meaning to us. And pretending is like play. But rehearsing has a little bit more of a serious tone. And it's a lot more respect on rehearsing than it is pretending. Okay. So keep that in mind. I hope that helps. Someone else says, can I do this walking meditation without having it all figured out? Yes, absolutely. First of all, we're ever evolving, so you're not going to always want the same things for forever. So having down to the detail, don't even worry about that. That's not a thing. The beauty of this is you don't need every detail. You just need an emotional blueprint, right? Who do you want to be? Right? You only want what you want because you think it's going to give you a certain feeling. So if you ask yourself, who do I want to be? Imagine for yourself, what is that energetic blueprint? What does that person feel like? What does it feel like to live in that person's body? What's that person's emotional set point? How do they deal with life? How do they cope with challenges? How do they, handle certain experiences? This is all left up to you, because again, you assign the meaning that everything has for you in your life. What you want in your life is based on whatever meanings you give things. So if you think about it from that standpoint, that's all you need to focus on. And then the more you do it, the more natural it's going to become. Again, you want to condition your body so well that by the time that manifestation, that miracle, that prayer gets answered, it's not that you're not going to be in gratitude, it's that you're not going to be overly wowed, like excited in a sense, because you will have practiced it so much that it feels like your normal, natural state of being. Like this is supposed to happen, like you're expecting it, right? So it's practicing, not pretending. And then also it's walking with the energy of love, confidence, abundance, even if you don't have the evidence, because by the time you practice it consistently, your emotions are the magnet, right? You're not looking for it because it feels like you already have it. You're not checking your 3D. You're not looking for that email. You're not saying, where is it? You're not questioning. You're just going through your day to day life, trusting that it's all going to unfold in the perfect, most divine way. And that's what Joe says in a lot of his meditations at the end, is to ask the divine to bring it to you in a way that's right for you. Right. And that means that whatever that looks like, you're gonna recognize it as the blessing that you've been asking for. But you're not going to be able to predict it, because if you can predict it, he says, now you're back in the known. You're trying to control, you're trying to force, you're trying to manipulate, you're trying to foresee something that, if you're resting in the unknown, if you're trusting, You're going to let the divine allow it to unfold in a way that's going to ultimately be perfect for you, but you're not trying to control, force, or manipulate, and you're not coming from a space of lack. And I hope that helps. But next, we're going to get into part two. And in part two of chapter 9, Dr. Joe talks about priming the brain for the future. And it goes back to the premise of mental rehearsal. But he talks about it from the standpoint of what's happening in your brain as you're mentally rehearsing. And he says that we're installing new neural architecture that's tied to a future reality. So he talks about firing and wiring neural networks that start to become familiar the more you practice, right? And now over time, that practice becomes your default state. So, in the walking meditation, as we're continuing to take our sitting meditations from closed eyes, stationary, to motion pictures in our real lives as we deal with the people we're familiar with, as we deal with familiar circumstances, he says it helps us synchronize the body and the brain to what we're calling in. So you're moving your body into a new chemical signature and you're priming it for what's to come rather than living from the emotions of the past. And we know, y'all, we do this work because number one, we know how difficult it could be to reprogram ourselves, right? If it were easy, everybody would be doing it. This work, I say this all the time, this work is not for the faint of heart. If you a punk, you ain't gonna make it. You're gonna tap out, you're gonna call him a fraud, and you're gonna say this doesn't work. But if you stick in there, if you know that things that are worth it sometimes are hard and challenging, and you stick with it and you persevere, you're gonna see things unfold and you're gonna know that this work is godly, this work is divine, this work is a gift, it's a true treasure, and it helps you unlock yourself. You are the treasure. It helps you to unlock parts of yourself that you didn't even know you could, right? So, part of what we want to do is prime our bodies for what is to come. And he says this meditation is one of those opportunities where we use movement to dissolve the illusions of our reality, the illusions of separation. Whenever I hear people in the manifestation community talk about um, how desires are divine. They're the way that the divine speaks to us and wants to express itself through us. So if you get a vision of anything that you say to yourself, I would like to experience that, or that's for me, that is divine. It's God's way of saying, if I plant this seed in your mind, it's a possibility. Your only job is to align with the the potential that that possibility can actually unfold for you. That's what faith is. That's why religion even exists, so that we can believe beyond our five senses and something, right? So the whole premise of the meditation is to get you to take everything that you've been in prayer about, everything that you've sat in meditation with and accepted in that meditation. Now open your eyes, and life is this great game of illusions. And what we're doing through this work is helping ourselves dissolve the illusions. Now, we can tell ourselves everything intellectually, affirmations all the time, but it doesn't mean that the body's going to accept it if it hasn't been conditioned to accept it. Because part of what he talks about is we have to download that software into our body so that our nervous system feels safe with whatever it is we're calling in. So if we go into our day-to-day lives after a great meditation, right, they feel amazing. You feel high, you feel connected, you feel like you are powerful. And then comes Mary, who sits across the desk from you, who gets on your last nerves. You can't stand her, and now you're back in the same old stories about her. Now your emotional state, you're agitated, and you spiral back into what? The old version of you. We do the walking meditation so that we can condition our bodies while our eyes are open, while we're moving through day-to-day life, into that desired state of being, so that that becomes our default state. And so many people say that as they practice things like the walking meditation, that people in their lives notice how different they show up. So you become more resilient, right? You don't need proof. you start embodying these energies of who you think you'd be should everything unfold the way you desire it to unfold. And the body starts to believe what the mind has emotionally rehearsed. That's the beauty of the walking meditation. He walks us through it at the end of chapter 9. And this is where Joe, his saying, hope is for beggars, this is where it really hits home for me. Because I've caught myself hoping on many occasions, on many subjects, instead of knowing. But through this practice, I've learned that when you feel the future as real right now, hope dissolves into trust, and you stop waiting and you start embodying. And that makes all the difference. So you're not looking for anything, you're not doubting, you're not, waiting for the world to validate, right? I feel like hope is one of those things where you're still waiting for something outside of you to validate your wholeness, to validate your worthiness. And the more you say, well, I hope this happens, who do you need permission from to know that it's going to happen? Just you, right? Like you're the one that needs to give yourself permission. But that permission slip, it doesn't feel natural to you unless you rehearse, unless you practice that naturalness of being one with whatever you're giving yourself permission for, that mental rehearsal. So this is where, like, if you've never heard that saying before, Dr. Joe says it in a couple of his lectures, that hope is for beggars. And at one point, I made a video about it today, but at one point, it didn't used to sit well with me because I thought he was somewhat bashing people or shaming people for being hopeful. But through this work, I really understand what he means. And I think Neville also drove that home for me, that there's a level of certainty that when you know, you just know. And it's something about having that inner conviction that is undeniable. Like I've had moments where no matter what the circumstance was, I would believe for a certain thing and I would have to repeat to myself, whether it was conditioning. I was doing walking meditations before I knew I was doing walking meditations. I'm talking about 15, 20 years ago. And looking back now, I was priming myself for what I was praying for. I was declaring it, I was speaking it out of my mouth. I would go for walks and say my affirmations out loud until I felt super, super powerful. And to me, that's a form of walking meditation as well. And as I was doing that, things felt solidified within me. I didn't have a worry or care about how it was going to happen. I just knew. So you go from, looking for external validation, such as proof, to just knowing and being okay with just being and trusting that it's going to come when it comes. It's going to unfold. You're not trying to force, you're not trying to manipulate, none of that. And I think we all have instances where we can look back on our past at when those moments, those types of moments like what I'm describing unfolded for us. And so I'm going to get into one of the questions that came out of this section was, what's the best way to know if the meditation worked? How do you feel? That's my parameter for everything that I do. How does it make you feel? Because if you feel more separate, then get back in the game. You ain't do what needed to be done. You didn't conquer Goliath or slay Goliath, as they would say. Um, Focus on how it makes you feel. Do you feel like your future is more real than your past? Or are you still feeling like, I want this, but here are XYZ obstacles? If that's the case, get back in the game. That's how you know the meditation worked. But if you feel more empowered, if you feel like you don't need proof, if you feel like I don't care how it happens, I'm not even looking for it, but I know it's going to happen somehow, some way, then you did what needed to be done. And so it's not a matter of whether the meditation worked. It's a matter of, did you exhaust the tool to achieve what you intended for? And for me, I use all of my tools to just help me get in alignment. I always tell people that the tools are not the way, right? The tool isn't the miracle. The meditation isn't the miracle. You are the miracle. The tool is just there to help you tap into what you already are. And that's the truth of who you are when you release resistance, when you stop believing in the illusions, when you stop believing in separation, right? So I use the meditation to align with my truth, which is I am already whole, complete, abundant love. I am already one with my divine source. So all I need to do is remember that. And it's hard to remember that when I've been conditioned by the world, right? And so I sit in meditation to strip away the world, to strip away those ideas, those thoughts, that identity, and just be one with source and myself, right? And so the tool should make you feel more aligned. And if it doesn't, it's not that the tool didn't work, it's that you maybe you need to exhaust that tool or you need to pick another tool. Pick any tool, but make sure that the tool helps you get the job done. That's my rule of thumb. This next person says, can this help if I'm feeling stuck in my manifestations? Yeah. I mean, stuckness is again just being in a state of resistance, believing in the illusions, feeling like you're still separate. And the whole purpose, again, of these tools is to help you feel more aligned, to help you feel more whole, more complete, more abundant, more like as you're one with your source, not separate from your source. So sometimes we get stuck because we're still thinking from the same state of being that created the problem. And Einstein said you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. So you literally have to tap into another level of consciousness. And all it is just reaching for a new thought, reaching for a new state of being, a new feeling. And now you're in a totally different state of consciousness. And from there, you can come up with your solutions. You can allow it to flow into you. But you can if you are in the same state of consciousness that created the problem, right? If lack created the problem that you're in, the state of consciousness of lack, if that created the problems that you have in your life, you're not going to be able to solve it from that same state of consciousness. You have to reach for more abundant thoughts. You have to reach for understanding that your needs are always met. You have to reach for the state of consciousness where you know that you're already whole and complete, that everything always works out for you. Because if you're still reaching from nothing ever works, I never get what I want, God forgot about me, or, this stuff doesn't work, that's probably the state of consciousness that created the problem. You can't get there from there. So this meditation moves you out of your head and into your body, and it helps shift the emotional energy that's been keeping you stuck. And that's what I say for all the tools, all the meditations, they all work. I have people always in my comments and in my DMs on TikTok, y'all. I'm sorry, I've had bad experiences on social media when answering questions from strangers in my DM. If you have a question, please feel free to ask it on my TikTok page. I'm likely to respond in my comments. I'm very rarely am I going to my DMs to check messages from strangers. And a lot of times people ask me the strangest things in my TikTok DMs. And I'm just like, if you couldn't post this publicly, please don't ask it privately because I don't know. But anyways, yeah, I forgot where I was even going with that. But if you have any questions, if chapter 9 was that girl, like it was that girl for me, it really does move things. It really does give you something tangible to work with, to take from your everyday practice of meditation, whether you wake it up in the wee hours of the morning or going to bed at night with meditations, you still have a day to live, that dash, that those how many hours in a day? Those 8 hours of your day that you dedicate to work or whatever you do for a living, and then all the other time after that with your kids and the family or however you live your life, that time matters, and we can't just throw it away and feel like we could pat ourselves on the back just because we meditate. Because if you're not learning anything to take what you learn from your meditations, that peace, that stillness, that intentionality, that clarity, if you're not putting it into your day-to-day life, it means nothing really. And it kind of reminds me of how I used to feel when I would go to church when I was much younger. I used to feel like, dang, like we read the Bible, the pastor preaches on these sermons, but then I'm sitting next to somebody and they're talking about their neighbor and they're gossiping about something that's going on with somebody else. And it's like, it's kind of odd that we're doing that here and now when we just heard the word like but I knew that as a young kid, and I'm not professing to be perfect. I do those things from time to time myself, but that's why I'm so glad to have a practice like this because I hold myself accountable. I don't shine a light on anybody else because at the end of the day, the finger you're pointing at someone else is 10 more pointing back to you. So, there's always room for improvement, always room for growth. But the whole premise of the work is to take the work into your day to day life and improve the quality of your existence in your relationships, in your current circumstances, in all of the dynamics that you have in your reality. So, this chapter reminds us that we don't need to wait for external change to feel different. As Michael Jackson said, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and what? Make the change. When you walk as your healed, abundant, loved, whole self, life starts to rearrange to match who you become. So don't just visualize it, don't just sit with it, walk it, breathe it, live it. That's the supernatural part. So on Friday, we're going to wrap this week up with chapter 10. And it's such a short chapter that I did not break it up into parts. This chapter is going over case studies and it's making it real. And he shares, I think it's about 3 stories, but they're proof of what we've been learning. And it's basically that it's not just theory, right? It's transformation in motion. And these 3 people are going to tell us, or if you actually, the video drops tomorrow morning. Yeah. Come hear real life stories of people who changed their reality from the inside out. And that's basically what they did. And they used a combination, not just the walking meditation, but the kaleidoscope, the mind movie, blessings of the energy centers. And you get to see the work in motion in everyday people who are just like you and I. They are not, some high class, special people that have superpowers. They are regular, everyday people who are deciding to change from the inside out, become supernatural because it's what they desire, right? And if you want to follow along with every chapter, the full playlist is linked on my YouTube channel. It's also linked in all my bios, on all my profiles. And if you're creating your own future, once again, grab my Vision Book Journal. I got it in 2 colorways. It's also linked on my profiles. It's the perfect companion to your walking meditation and just this work in general. It's a self published journal that I created in 2017 to help you be intentional about creating whatever it is you desire in the areas of life that matter most. And I created 2 different colors because I had men and women that were really intrigued by my book. And so I published it in black for my guys. But it's the same book, y'all. Pick a color, any color. At any rate, I look forward to seeing you all on Friday. Thank you for rocking with me tonight. And until next time, I don't know who needs to hear this, but you got this. Bye, guys.